A little boy was dying of hunger and was returning to his house when there was a movement and a girl bumped into him while he was running away from some criminals. A criminal with a knife runs away and goes after the girls. The boy retreats but sees that the girls are crouched down, so he decides to stop the attacker and goes after him, but he is hit by the knife in his stomach and the frightened criminal runs away. As his life slips away, he thinks it's good they aren't hurt. He then wakes up in a luxurious room with a maid, and he thinks he is in the hospital and that the girls wooed him with it because he saved them. The maid quickly hugs him emotionally, and then apparently his new mother does too. It turns out that he was reincarnated as a little boy. He makes some movements with his hands, and they call him Cain, and that he has slept for a week, and they let him rest. Cain then starts looking for things around the room, and I understand that he was reincarnated like in the anime. In this he tries to understand things in his room, but the maid appears and helps him, changing him, feeding him, and burping him. The employee told him that he is Cain and is 3 years old. His father is called Garn, his mother Sarah, and has an older sister called Rain. Sarah is the second wife, and it seems that the first is called Maria, and she has 2 sons, Jin and Alec, so he is the 3rd son in the lineage, and his father is a high-ranking nobleman who has his own army and prevents other nations from invading the borders, and is part of a kingdom of the south is managed by him, the Forest of Monsters. So Cain is excited to know that there are adventurers, magic and monsters, and he wants to learn magic, but first he has to learn to read, and remembers that in his old world he lost his grandfather who was his only relative and had to live alone, and he had practically nothing to lose according to him. So his parents are surprised to learn that he already knew how to count, and they find it strange and think it has to do with the fever and him blacking out, but he disagrees, saying that he just wants to know more about this world, and his father encourages him and even says that you can't make him inherit everything, so it's really good for him to become someone important. So he asks to learn magic, and his sister consoles him by saying that he will have to be baptized at the age of 5 to do that, and his parents tell him to study the books until then. 5 seconds later Cain was in the room already mastering his magic, and he loses control of it in the room but manages to control it right before being caught. After all, it would attract a lot of attention. So his sister taught him everything about the 300 years of history of the kingdom and everything she has ever learned about history and how the world works. Apparently the first king was Japanese due to his name, probably also a reincarnated person who conquered everything in his life adventures, and taught him that there are all kinds of beings in this world such as elves, dwarves, beast people, and the like. So finally the day of Cain's baptism has arrived. Now he is 5 years old and his family takes him in a carriage, attracting the attention of everyone on the street. Cain will now go to Barbie princess school. Wait, wrong story. Then his sister shows her status and he finds out that she has 3 elements and that she adores him, and she is full of shame and he is scared. Apparently she is one of those maniacal sisters. And his parents explain to him about the blessings, that these spells range from level 1 to 5. The higher the level the greater the affinity, and that it is granted by the 7 main gods, which is the belief of the city they are in. Then the priest starts preaching, then a glow appears and he is transported to the kingdom of the 7 gods, and there they say that they waited a long time for this moment and call him by his real name, which is Kanzuya. So after introducing themselves they say that his death wasn't in the plans, that even if he didn't do anything the thief would trip and fall and everyone around would stop him in sequence. So Cain has an existential crisis. After all, he died for nothing, and then the goddess says that he died doing good, so they received the earth god's request and did so, reincarnating him. However, the goddess thought that breastfeeding and changing diapers would bring a lot of torment to him since he would keep his memories, so she sealed his memories until he was 3 years old, so he couldn't remember anything. Cain is grateful for the life they gave them and that he was able to learn magic and everything about that kingdom, so the goddess of magic grants him her blessing and tells him to keep trying. Then the god of war gives him his blessing, thus granting him sword and body skills. God of technology also grants his blessing and says to use your knowledge from the previous world but not to exaggerate. God of commerce also gives the boy a helping hand, and now he can evaluate items and have an item box. Goddess of the earth gives you her protection, and the god who created the world also gives him his blessing but does not reveal what ability he granted. Everything happened in Cain's mind, and when he came back and his parents asked to see his status, he pretended to have a stomach ache and ran away. After all, he can't attract attention, and certainly no one in that world must have achieved the 7 blessings. Remember that his parents said that the blessings go from 1 to 5, so he opened the status and he has all the blessings are level 10, and he questions what the gods did, and now he understands why they were laughing at the end and they told him to check when he gets back. Cain comes to the conclusion that he cannot let anyone see his status, but the god of creation gave him an ability capable of disguising his status. The old man thought of everything. Upon returning home, his parents, after asking if he was better, asked to see his status, and he showed them, but they were still scared because he had received the blessing of all 7 gods and because he had an absurd amount of mana which he forgot to tidy up. His father says that not even the palace mages have that, at most 10,000, and Cain had 344,000, and that with the item box and appraisal skill, no matter the job he will have a living. His sister congratulates him and his father tells him not to show his status to anyone else. One wrong step and he could be supervised by the government because he could become a threat. His father tells all employees present and his family to never never comment on Cain's status to anyone. Cain goes to his room and pays for a summoning book. He then decides to go out and summon a cute animal, but what he summoned was a totally ferocious monster. His sister and a little girl were passing by and the monster decides to attack them, and he remembers the previous situation that caused his death and goes after the monster just like before. He then makes the monster return with his spell, but he falls to the ground. They both cry and he wonders if he will die again. But he wakes up and the girls are super relieved, especially his sister, and he reflects that he will be able to help many people in that kingdom. In his presentation to the kingdom he was very humble and says he counts on everyone's support and guidance. His father asks what he wants to do since he will not inherit the lands, and he says he wants to explore different corners of the world, meet people, and stay strong to protect everyone's smile, that he wants to be an adventurer. The goddess asks the creator god if it was really necessary to give level 10 blessings, and the creator god says that until he is 16 years old he will have to be very strong, and that even with these statuses it will not be enough, and that the time will come when they will need the blessing, help from his power. Cain's father hires an adventurous teacher for him. Upon receiving the news that the teacher was arriving and he teleported, but the magic was wrong and ended up falling on top of the teachers Millie and Nina, a cliché scene from an isekai anime, let's face it. Millie then introduces herself to her parents and Cain, all embarrassed. Apparently she is shy. Nina just says her name and greets them, a girl a few words, correcting, an elf a few words. Then Cain's father says that they don't need to be so formal. Millie is relieved, so they have 3 years to train him according to her father. Then Cain shows his skills with the sword at Millie's request, and Nina says that he is better than her. Millie then sees a duel with Cain, who easily blocks and attacks, impressing her, and he confirms saying that he has the blessing of the god of war when she asked. So Nina goes to teach him magic and says that she has level 3 magic, and he says that he has already mastered the basics of magic that he has been training, and demonstrates all the elements in attacks, surprising Nina, and she says that magic without conjuration only in high level. So after they ask, he confirms that he has the blessing of magic too, and Millie whispers to Nina that maybe they have nothing to teach. So he gives Millie a towel and she is surprised to see the item box that can apparently create any item, and the two come to a consensus that they won't be surprised anymore. If not, there will be no end. So Cain asks if he can train him outside, and they agree. After all, he would destroy the mansion if he used intermediate skills there. When they tell his father, he says he knew it would happen but not on the first day, and his mother is very proud of him. For the first time Cain went out into the world. All he had to do was return before sunset. Don't go too far and don't overdo it. He was enchanted by all the greenery and the world outside the mansion. Nina asks him to use an intermediate level magic, and he launches fire, completely destroying the target, and the explosion throws the girls back and they see that he is far beyond intermediate. Millie even questions that he must have used a lot of mana, and he reveals that no problem, and they are both surprised that he has so much mana. Then a wild rabbit attacks them. The girls dodge it and Cain finishes it off, and he says he will take it to show his mother and sister and stores it in the item box, so it doesn't actually create items but just stores it. It makes sense until because it would be stolen a lot. After that they say they have time still and they start looking for more monsters to hunt, and she identifies them, so she teaches Cain how to also do perception magic, and of course he could do it too but at a much higher level than her, and she just accepts, and Millie says that you can't compete or compare with him. They start to hunt the rabbits, and Millie stops Cain when he was about to enter a forest, and she reveals that once every few decades the powerful monsters that reside in the forest get together and attack the city, and they tell him to stay strong. So when that happens, protect the city, and he agrees and looks at the forest. When he gets home he sees that he is already level 8 and is surprised and wonders how if he only killed rabbits, until he realizes that he has the ability to multiply experience by 100 times. The guy basically has an infinite XP bonus, and he complains about the gods because he just wanted to live a peaceful life, and if they find out the government will execute him. They then take him to the guild to find stronger monsters, and there they meet the receptionist, who is called Rudy and is half a beast. She then talks to them and tells them about a wolf mission, and the girls say it's perfect for him, and the receptionist doesn't understand, but when they reveal that he is the son of the lord of the kingdom she starts to get formal, and Cain as always is very humble and says that he is counting on her support and that he cannot register yet as he is only 5 years old. Then a troublemaker arrives and starts offending the girls of D-ranked mages who are on a babysitting mission, and the guy is a complete asshole, telling them to leave the child and serve him a drink. They refuse and tell him to go to a place that has these services, and he keeps saying that a D rank denied the request from the all-powerful C rank, and he grabs Nina's arm. Millie was going to go up but 2 idiots hold her, and the asshole there keeps telling her to obey, and when he was about to touch Nina's face Cain holds his hand and apologizes and says that he has training and asks if he could not get in the way. The boy is humble personified. The asshole asks who he is, and he introduces himself as Cain and their student. They tell him to run away, and he says that even if they say that he needs to train, and tells the guy not to get in the way and slaps him, knocking him to the ground. He gets up but is tripped by Cain and asks who he is, and he introduces himself, and when he was about to say that his father was the nobleman of the lands, the guy gets up and punches him and says to stop talking nonsense, but Cain gives him a jab, and the asshole now pulls out a sword, and Cain tells him, "It was you who pulled hold it out. The asshole attacks Cain, who avoids everything and tells him to apologize to the girls. He refuses, so Cain takes the sword with 2 fingers and throws him out. He asks about the other 2 and they threaten to hurt Millie, and Cain goes after the idiots and also throws him to the ground. Nina then hugs him and says that next time she will protect him, and Millie is surprised that he is good at fighting too, and he confirms saying that he learned from books. You see, Bando, read books and you can be as angry as Cain. There in the forest, Cain continues with his mega powerful skills and of course a snack break, super important, and you straighten that posture. Let's be brave like Cain. 3 years have passed and the girls have refused to extend the contract, and he asks if there's any way he can thank them, and he remembers that Millie said she wanted a magic bag once, which is basically a replica of the item box that he has it, but it's very expensive according to her. So he enters the forest in search of items to make such a magical bag, quickly ends up with a very powerful ogre, and ends up with a monstrous dragon to make one for the girl as well. The guard sees the fire in the forest and thinks it is a monster rebellion. Scared, he summons the army to come out to protect the city, and all the citizens are scared. His father then advances with the army, but Cain has already obtained the items and teleports but drops his scarf. Once there, his father sees a crater and Cain's scarf in the background and understands what happened. The next day the two talk while Cain hunts, and say that they can't believe that he is 8 years old and that he is much stronger than them, and that they are sad to say goodbye. They say goodbye with sad faces and say that this is his graduation, and he gives them the magic bags and says that he made them himself and they would like them to accept, and tells them what they are made of. And they are surprised. After all, they are monsters that A-rank adventurers come together to defeat with a lot of effort, but they soon remember that it is Cain, and he says that there is not much room, that he believes that at most his entire mansion can fit, and Millie scares her, saying that it's a hell of a thing because the bag she was going to buy would fit a maximum of 2 carriages, and that it's something that you have to save a lot of money to have. Cain is surprised and says that they're bags, and they add that it is certainly a national treasure, totally amazed, and say that a lot of people might go after them if they see them using them, and he says that it's okay, that if someone different, if the 3 of them hold it, it will bear the weight of everything inside, and they conclude that it is much more valuable than a national treasure. And they then accept and ask if it's okay to accept because they feel like they didn't teach him much, and he corrects them saying that they taught him how good it is to have a snack in the open air, the importance of friends, and how cool it is to go on adventures, but is interrupted by the 2 kissing his cheeks, making him blush. And the 2 say goodbye and say that if he needs help after becoming an adult, he can call them and that they will always help him, and that they had a lot of fun too, and they thank him. And Cain says he's grateful for everything all this time, and they walk away. At home, his father asks him about what he did in the forest and that he found his scarf, so he says the monsters he killed, surprising his father, but his father continues to lecture him, saying that one of the monsters could come to the city and how hard he tries to keep the city safe, and Cain keeps apologizing to him. Cain starts in the next scene kicking off a dragon, and with that he had his mana above 80 million and now has the title of enemy of all monsters, and dragon slayer. The little guy is no joke. Then 2 years passed. Cain, now 10 years old, had to go to the royal capital to be a debutante there, a noble thing. Cain's sister says she is excited to study with him, but he will only be able to go to the academy when he turns 12, and in the meantime while they are going to the capital it will take 1 week to get there. Cain spots a battle against monsters 3 kilometers away, impressing his father with his range of perception. Cain sees that the horses won't arrive in time to help, so he uses wind magic and quickly goes to meet the monsters. There are some knights protecting the carriage, and the monsters were going to attack her, but Cain appears. The knight says that this is no place for children, but Cain ignores him and finishes off all the monsters with his magic, and even using an element on his sword to avoid hitting the carriage, and so he kills all the monsters. The knight does not let his guard down, so he introduces himself as the 3rd son of the Marquis, and his knights arrive to help, but Cain has already taken care of everything. Then Cain heals all the guards that were injured at once, and then guards the people who didn't persist in the item box. His father arrives next, seeing that Cain has dominated the entire situation, but he sees the coat of arms on the carriage and kneels down, and Cain follows him, and he says that they are Princess Telestia and Miss Silk. And Cain is surprised because it is the Duke's daughter who is above the Marquis. They thank him embarrassedly, and his father introduces him. They are still scared, and he asks if he can use magic to calm their hearts and minds, and they agree. The 2 then have a peace they've never felt, and then they thank him and start vying for his attention and saying how incredible he was in saving them, and they say that they're going to the debut too, and drag him to the carriage, saying that if he goes he likes to travel together, and he screams for his father, who stares without understanding anything. Then in the carriage they start hitting on him, asking him to call them by their first name, and he remains embarrassed and follows what they asked, until they are interrupted by a guard who says they are arriving, and he asks if he heard everything, and the guard confirms that it is. Upon arriving in the city, Cain was saying goodbye, but they ask him to continue with them, and if other monsters appear. His father even tries to save him, saying that it is inappropriate, but the princess and the other girls say that Cain is stronger than any servant who could stay with them, and the father confirms that he could, and they cut him off and say that's it. And they continue to charm Cain to accept it, and he accepts as long as it is a very large room with separate beds, and they are super happy, and his father father tells him to act with prudence, remembering that he is only 10 years old. Once there they make him sleep in the middle and then they bring the beds closer together. I can only say one thing, man, they are so into him, and he is embarrassed and tries to move them away, but they are very stubborn and he ends up giving in. Cain the next day has dark circles under his eyes and says that there is no way he can sleep with them hugging him, so he spends many days without sleeping until he finally arrives in the royal capital. Then there the vice captain appears and thanks Cain for protecting the princess and the duke's daughter and for bringing his companions that he kept in the item box and that he will take care of them now and that the families thank him. So he gives the details and says to tell the families that they were heroes, and then he was about to say goodbye, but the vice captain says that he has an audience with the king and he is surprised because he just arrived in the capital. Once there he bows, but the king tells him to raise his head, so the advisor says that he alone faced an army with 50 orcs and ended up together with a high-ranking orc general, impressing everyone, and they continue saying all the facts and thanks to this they want to give you a reward. And the king says that if it weren't for him the two wouldn't be alive, so he proclaims him Baron, and Cain was more surprised than I was with all this, and he also won 10 platinum coins and a mansion of his own, and the general is like, a 10-year-old boy, 10 years old, like, man I'm shit my brother. Then an envious nobleman goes there and says that it is unthinkable for a 10-year-old boy to have all that and such a title, and Cain even agrees and humbly refuses. But the king tells the noble to shut up and asks if he could annihilate 50 orcs alone like Cain. Wow, and the king got it right, I liked him. And he asks in a friendly way if Cain will accept, and Cain, without much of a choice, humbly accepts. Then the king calls him to a private meeting. Then there his father tells him that of his sons, he was the first to be promoted. Then the king and the girls arrive and the king says he is truly grateful for what he did, and the Duke of Silk also personally thanks Cain. And Cain tells them to keep their heads up and stays there being humble. So they continue talking and the king says that he is not a fool to leave such a talented child helpless when Cain's father asked about the title of Baron, and that he will receive payments according to the regulations. After all he has to maintain his mansion and more information about nobility, his father will guide him. Then the king and the duke ask him to accept the girl's hand. They will only be engaged until they reach the age of majority, and he asks why he is scared and they respond, it's not obvious. They walked holding his arms in the carriage, and even slept with the girls too, and now that this has happened they will not be able to marry them to anyone else. And Cain says he didn't do it because he wanted to be embarrassed, and the two of them shout if he's not satisfied with his daughter, and he says that's not it, calm down. So we went back a little earlier when the king, the duke and the advisor were talking about what to do with him, and the advisor said to offer him a title so that he could become independent and a mansion. The king then asks the girls who were glued to him what if he chose one of them to be his bride, and they both say they want to and start to fight, and the king says that it's decided. Then Cain will stay in that kingdom. King is not stupid, he wants someone powerful around. Back in the present they tell him to accept and take responsibility, and with pressure from the king, the duke and his father refraining from giving an opinion and letting him decide, he accepts the engagement. And the girls say that they still haven't forgotten the day they brought their bodies together, and everyone in the room misunderstands what happened. Cain tries to explain himself but ends up getting even more complicated and he just apologizes. With her sister, she asks what the story is about him having two brides, and her father says that the king asked him if his son is a conqueror, and he apologizes to both of them again. In the cathedral he meets again with the 7 gods wanting to discuss their status, and they say that currently despite lacking life experience he is the strongest human, and asks if he would like to become a demigod. And he just thinks about, and the creator god asks him to create entertainment for them from the past life so they can spend some time. He thinks about something and the gods agree. After all they can read his mind. Then he runs out of a women's clothing store that his mother and sister had taken him to. Then outside he recognizes Parma, who was the girl from before when he summoned a monster. He says he's about to debut. She says she's helping at her uncle's store and introduces him to her uncle, and Cain asks to see the store. There he exchanges ideas with him about how he wants to create an item and wants to stop manufacturing and the sale on his care. Apparently Cain wants him to create the checkers game, and he says he is honored and will do his best and that he already understands the idea. Cain gives him a silver coin. He is embarrassed to accept, but Cain tells him to accept it as his investment. And then his sister is outside in a rage because he abandoned her out of the blue, and he is embarrassed because he forgot. So he tells her that regardless she would look beautiful in any outfit, and she forgives him. After she does, he sees all the clothes she bought. The maid informs him that the game he hired is ready and that he was called to see it. There he realizes that it is identical to his world, so he shows how it works, and the little girl's uncle says that he is a genius and that this will sell a lot. And he advises to make a popular one and one for the nobility, for the nobles to feel important, and will certainly want a more refined item, but the popular version version has to be at an affordable price for everyone. And Tamanis, who is the girl's uncle, says that he will not be able to produce because the company does not have the funds for the amount he requested, and he has already withdrawn more gold coins, and he accepts and gets very excited and tells them to make a contract and present it to the god of commerce. And with that, no one will be able to produce the same producer over 3 years, and it's really very useful, and that's how they make the contract. So he asks to make an even more luxurious version for the royal court, and the little girl's uncle is amazed by his connections and accepts such request. Then Cain remembers the gods and wonders if they are having fun with the game. So already in his mansion he runs when he remembers his debut. On the way his father says to be careful with the parents who come to present their daughters because he will be the target of attention since he became a baron, and he seriously says that he will deal with them, and his father is amazed by your maturity. There he meets the envious nobleman, and then the duke and his daughter. Then the duke introduces himself, and Cain understands that the secret meeting has to stay secret, and Cain is afraid of his smile, which is intimidating, and he says he hopes to have good relations with him from now on, and we don't know if he's pissed or if it's just his way. Then Cain praises Silk and says that she looks like a princess and she is completely enchanted, and her father coughs and says that he seems to have a way with women despite his age, and his father says that his sister doesn't hit very well and it must be because of him living with her, and they both laugh. Then the king appears and greets everyone. Then Cain, his father and mother introduce themselves to the king, and his father says to greet the princess Teles. Cain is a good talker. He almost sends a poem about how he almost forgot to breathe when he saw her, leaving him enchanted, and the king already asks what he did to raise such a flirtatious son and says to see the telecom that he was completely in love. He then shows the game to the king, who appears interested but says he will see later when he goes to the meeting room so they can talk about how he treats his daughter. His father then says that he is surprised that he developed a game without him knowing, and Cain says that he is a baron and that he has to find ways to increase his riches, and his father says that he is proud and that he will solve some things and to interact with other children. Silk then appears out of nowhere and invites Cain to chat. She is all formal and he says to just call him Cain, and she keeps throwing her charm at him until they are interrupted by some noble brats, ironically the son of the envious nobleman and his little friends. The envious man's son greets her and thinks she was going to attack him, and she greets her coldly, and one of the friends says that the envious man's son is talking to her and that he is the envious marquis's eldest son and says that he is disturbing. Then he says he doesn't know how to greet others. Cain introduces himself as a baron, and the boy questions a simple baron's son speaking like that, and that they are the sons of viscounts and more, thinking they are just because they are sons, and they have not achieved disgrace none. The guy offends Cain and talks for him to apologize so he can hold those two. Silk was going to scold him, but Cain says that everything is fine and that it's the envious boy there who will apologize, and the envious boy is over there and challenges him to a duel. Outside, Silk hugs Cain and the envious boy stays there trying to get attention so the duel can start soon. One of the little friends starts a mega invocation but casts weak magic. The envious man's second friend launches some weak pebbles, and then he goes again, but the princess now interrupts and says that Cain is not the son of a baron and that he is actually a baron. And the boys are already shaking at the base, and Silk continues talking about his incredible feats, and the boys lower their heads asking for forgiveness and then run away after Cain humbly accepts their apology. After that, Silk and Cain laugh together about the situation, and Silk says that he has a dark side because he knew that the jealous boys didn't understand the situation and that they would apologize after finding out, and she says that she won't tell the telecom if he goes to a meeting with her. And Teles arrives. Cain covers his mouth so as not to tell what happened and accepts the meeting. Teles also wants a meeting with him. He accepts, and the king arrives asking to meet with whom. In his secret meeting, he plays with the king, and the duke comments on the meeting with his daughter and says that no one knows about the engagement yet, and the two of them squeeze his shoulder tightly and tell him to be very careful and call him of gallant. The counselor then gives him the blueprint and key to the mansion and says that the king was dying to come and play the game with him, but he had commitments, and when he was about to say goodbye, the duke appears and starts a game that he is not a fool. Cain goes to his mansion and it's like all abandoned and run down, so he starts exploring, sees that the lights are off and sees that it's a really grand space despite being finished, and uses magic to restore everything. The guy, it's the Harry Potter of ice guys. And Cain is very happy with his new house. The maid who took care of him as a child came at her request, and with her new employees, they were about to start cleaning, but Cain cleaned everything with magic. Everyone was surprised except Sylvia, who is the maid who took care of him since he was a child, so the new butler reminds him that today his brothers will be coming home and he hurries to go visit them. There they say that they can hardly believe that he got a title and a mansion before them and that he is the pride of the family, and they keep teasing his sister saying that when she visits the mansion ghosts will catch her, but when she gets there her parents see that she has fallen fixed everything with magic. Everyone is enchanted by everything, and his father advises him to put some art because nobles value this a lot, and he said he put a stuffed animal. Then the maid scream, and when he arrives in the room his father sees a dragon that not even class adventurers they would be able to defeat her, and he is surprised and says that one of these is worth 10,000 platinum coins, and Cain realizes how valuable it was. His mother screams, and they go to her. She was scared because the bathroom is one of those automatic Japanese toilets that release jets of water and she liked it. His father also uses it and liked it and they say they are going to have one at home. Then his father guides him throwing a mansion opening party and Cain is lost, but his butler made a list for him. The guy is prepared and Cain will have to call all the nobles including the one he doesn't like according to the butler. He's not very good at formalities, but Sylvia guides him to do it his way with her own hospitality and he already prepares glass cups and hamburgers after guiding the chef and Sylvia loved trying it, after which she even tries one too many wine with alcohol because Cain couldn't drink and made this request but ends up spilling the bottles and he sees that it's too strong. And Cain receives news that the king is calling him and the king was pissed because he didn't receive the invitation to the party at his mansion that he gave him and the duke tries to alleviate it because only the high class can invite the king but the king doesn't want to know anything. The duke rubbed the invitation in his face and he's pissed. How can Cain neglect his future second father, referring to the engagement? The king is very pissed and it's comical, but Cain takes the invitation and says that he was actually hoping to deliver it in person because he knows how busy he is and the king is already bragging to the duke. Upon returning home, he explains that the king will go and the maids are very surprised and Cain reveals that the third princess is his bride and that he is counting on them to welcome everyone and they are excited. On the day of the event, the duke and Silk are enchanted by the red dragon right at the entrance and Silk says that one day he will live there. Then Cain makes a toast to everyone who visited him and everyone is also super enchanted by the sparkling alcoholic drink he made there and the elegant glass. Then the king arrives, surprising everyone and he also tries the drink and is amazed by the delicious burger that Cain served him. The queen is already excited about the technology in the toilet and says that she also wants it in her castle. The king is going to test it and already scolding Cain for not sharing something refined with him too. Cain then agrees to put it on for him too and the king announces that he is delighted with all the hospitality down to the smallest details and that it was the best hospitality of all, thus making all the nobles applaud him. The butler warns that the envious nobleman arrives and the butler was going to stop him after thanking him, saying how small the mansion is, but Cain lets him and he gets scared by the dragon and then goes to the hall talking about Cain's bad taste and how deplorable are the guests who came when everyone stares at him and starts murmuring how rude he is. He drinks the drink and pretends he didn't like it. He does the same with the hamburger and continues eating and the butler tells him to put up with the guy because he's a marquis and can't make a fuss. Apparently he's above Cain in the hierarchy. Cain then has an idea. He gives him souvenirs that are glasses and he asks for all the glasses and the burger recipe and Cain says he can't do that but he will bring him something much better and the envious person gets excited and suddenly the king appears behind Cain. And he says that of course he came after all, he saved his daughter and says that if he usually has that tyrannical behavior that he saw, he will have to rethink some future things and the king says that he has to have exemplary behavior and the envious man apologizes and leaves quickly. Soon after, Silk says he realized what he did and he laughs and the duke asks if he then used them and he says he used the greatest pressure in the kingdom and the king looks at him and he already realizes that he's going to take a scolding and everyone laughs and the king jokes with him about the pressure. But then he got a 2-hour lecture from the king about not being used by his future son and Cain apologizes. Cain then meets with the vice captain to leave some materials. He even shows him a warehouse but he says it will be too small so the vice captain says he can leave it at the training field and suddenly Cain releases several monsters like a class adventurers could defeat by surprising the vice captain. The vice captain asks if he is a hero or a disciple of gods but he denies it and says that he is only the son of Marquis Garm and Cain was sneaking out after the vice captain didn't ask any more questions and went to evaluate the materials but he invites Cain to join the training and meet the captain who loves strong people. Already in training, the vice captain introduces him to the knights as a hero and says that the captain will arrive soon. One of the knights says that he is just a child and if it's okay to fight with himself and the vice captain says to he tries first then and he underestimates Cain saying he can attack first. He quickly disarms the guy and he sees that he overdid it and was about to leave but the vice captain has an idea. He fights them all at once and that's what he did until the captain appears and asks what the hell is going on there and she hugs Cain and consoles him that he must be scared of the horrible men surrounding him and that he must have lost his parents. Cain realizes that she is an elf and the vice captain tells her about Cain's deeds. And she gets excited and tells everyone to go out that she's going to battle him and they go out murmuring that it's her rude way and that she has the title of master swordsman after she doesn't introduce herself and just says that warriors show up with their swords in duels. She then tells him to get ready and she goes up and tells him to relax because her sword is blunt. Cain can defend and counterattack on an equal footing with her. She is excited. Everyone is super surprised until Cain use your speed ability and defeat it with your sword. floor. And she looks at him but with a different look. She hugs him and says that she has decided that she is going to marry him, and he is completely embarrassed, saying that he is not old enough for that and he doesn't even know her, and she says that he is right. Then she introduces herself as Tijuana, is captain of the Order of Knights and has the title of Viscountess, and is the daughter of a duke who takes care of the northern forest and who does not need to care about age differences, as elves live for at least 300 years and in this case her appearance won't change, and he says that wasn't the point, and she remains there insistent, and Cain goes behind the vice captain saying that he has to talk to his father and other people, remembering the princesses and trying to avoid that, and she agrees with him and says that she will get an audience with the king for the decision, and Cain already thinks that the king would kill him for being flirtatious again, and that's what she did. She said that she decided to marry him and left the king, Cain's father, and everyone in the room surprised. Ray asks for an explanation on how he got there, and he tells him and says that he didn't talk about the engagement because it was confidential information, and his father asks if he knows the captain's position. The king explains that her kingdom used to be a kingdom of elves, but there were people wanting to enslave them, so the ancient hero saved them and attached the territory to the kingdom so that they could join forces and protect each other, entertaining them as an independent kingdom, and basically he was propositioned by a princess from another nation. Then the king tells her about the engagement and says that he is sorry for her, and she says that she understands with a sad face, but in reality she got even more excited. After all, he was recognized by the king and the duke. In other words, he is much more stronger than she imagined, and her desire to marry him only increased. So the king says he understands her feelings and tells her to write a letter to her father, and she drags Cain to train more while she writes the letter, and the king stands there amazed that he managed to get even her, who is the strongest knight of kingdom. The king wonders how he is so strong. His father says he doesn't know. The vice captain says he had a reaction when he asked if he was a hero, the disciples of gods, and they say to show him that, and the image came to us of a book. Days later, the vice captain meets Cain and says that he looks tired, and he tells him that Tijuana has been dueling with him day after day. The vice captain thanks him because thanks to him she has become even stronger, and Cain reveals that the title of master swordsman appeared to him these days. Then the vice captain takes him to the palace to see the king, who gives him the book of the first king and hero Yuya, which is passed down from generation to generation, and he sees unique Japanese writings and spells and gets all excited about the levels of the spells. So the king says he understands now and that none of them can read, and Cain realized he was Japanese. The king then asks who he really is, and Cain thinks a little and decides to trust them with the truth and asks them to promise that he will stay between them. And so he tells the truth, surprising everyone. His father asks if he really is his son, and he says yes, that the gods confirmed it when he was baptized, and everyone is amazed that he met the gods, something that no one has ever done. So they ask to see the status and he shows it, and everyone is completely amazed at the power and blessings he received, and the king asks why he didn't say it before everyone in the world has to bow down to him, because the chosen title by God, it's never been seen, and Cain says it's because he doesn't want to. That he is immensely happy with the life he is having now, and that in his past life he lost all his relatives and felt alone. Who thanks his father for the life he gave him and apologizes to the king for the secrets he hid, and asks to continue treating him as the usual Cain. And the king says he understands and that the kingdom will continue to see him as Baron Cain, son of Garm, but wouldn't it be better for him to become the king? At the same time, Tijuana enters the room asking for her husband, and shows the letter from his father giving permission to marry Cain, and Cain says goodbye to the king and says he is in a hurry, but Tijuana grabs him by the scruff of the neck and drags him away. And the duke laughs and tells the king that in Cain's way he doesn't need to worry, that Cain will always be Cain, and the king smiles and says that it's true, and for everyone to maintain absolute secrecy about what was said today, and upon returning to his rooms he asks Cain in his thoughts to protect everyone in the kingdom. Then later Cain gets scolded by his two fiancées about why he is also engaged to the captain, so he explains the situation and Silk accepts, and Tellys tells him to stop accepting engagements without thinking, but at the same time Tijuana invades the room dragging him to duel again. Back to Cain reading diary. Yuya left it on record for the next Japanese person who got there that he was reincarnated in his original form after having suffered the accident. Tellys and Silk arrive to put pressure on him and then begin to fight over him, but he says he is busy studying and runs away, but Tijuana soon interrupts, wanting to duel as well, and he apologizes and runs away. The reason is that on the day next is his 12th birthday, and with that he will be able to join the guild as a great adventurer. Already in the guild he bumps into a very friendly red-haired adventurer who tells him to take it easy on his future adventures, and says goodbye. He finds him from family too. Receptionist called Risha gives him all the necessary instructions so that he can register his magical power too, and he seems to have hidden it there. With that he started in the G ranking and remembered his masters that it was the D ranking again. Some adventurers idiots go after Cain and he quickly dodges them all, and when one of them was about to draw his sword, the adventurer from before arrives and scares the idiots. Claudie says he doesn't need to thank them after all he saw Cain's movements, he did that for idiots, don't worry. Hurt and calls Cain to drink some juice there. Cain reveals that his private teachers helped him develop, and the adventurer called Claude looks suspiciously to the side and changes the subject, and Cain asks about the name he calls Ice, and Claude says that it's due to his group with his wife. She uses ice and he uses fire, and above he is mega impressed. Claude then shows his card, which is gold, and says that it is from an A rank adventurer and that it is very far from the SSS rank, which is the first king and hero, and they say it's a card. Dark at the same time his wife appears and starts scolding him about how he is loitering, and he introduces Cain and she befriends him. And then pulls him by the ear and keeps scolding him there, telling him to hurry to the mission. Cain saw several boring missions like taking out the trash and things like that, but he realizes that there was a mission to get rid of goblins, and so he took it. There was no limit to the reward, but when he was leaving Tijuana didn't find her. He was on his way to training. However, knowing that Cain would have his first adventure, she said that as a good wife she couldn't miss it. It's worth remembering that she's just a fiancée, but for her things are faster now. In the forest she's radiant with Cain on a mission alone, and then Cain hurries, and using his ability to identify some goblins, Cain quickly heals the villager while Tijuana attacks the goblins that surrounded him, but they were strong, so Cain strengthened her with his magic. This made her very happy and she attacked them there. The monsters while declared her wedding vows to Cain, and I confessed that it was actually beautiful to see, strangely rushing. After all, she is rushing too much, but in the end, after she hugs Cain, after having eliminated all the goblins, dinosaurs appear and Cain tells her to take the villager who he took care, and that's how he quickly froze the dinosaurs, impressing Tijuana and even his masters who were after the dinosaurs and came across just a crater in the earth. Receptionist was surprised because it's a D ranking mission, and he says he defeated about 30, scaring them away. She went to tell the guild master, but he wasn't there, and the second in command called him there and accused him of cheating by taking the money. After all, he is a GE rank. How the hell could he defeat such dinosaurs? He decides to revoke Cain's license as an adventurer, but the guild master arrives at the time, looks at Cain and then sits down and questions the second in command how the hell he came to that conclusion. Then he says to get into the case. Tijuana entered the room and she, as always, hugs him and calls him her husband, surprising everyone. Cain corrects him saying that they are engaged and that it's a secret, and the guild master calls him Baron Cain, revealing that he was the hero who saved the princess, leaving the second in command completely desperate with his actions towards him. The master also reveals that he is Marquez Gar's son and that if he marries Tijuana he will be his brother-in-law, revealing that her brother is the guy is already begging for yours life and asks for forgiveness for having insulted a nobleman. After all, there is a law that says that whoever does this will be executed, and Cain tells him to relax, that he won't do that, but for him not to make any more accusations without proof, and he still agrees with his head bowed. Cain he asks if the guild will accept his dinosaurs, and the master says with pleasure, and that he will also raise his rank to C rank, but Tijuana says that it is not enough because he defeated a 10-year-old red dragon and that the master is stronger than her. Says he can't jump straight to B rank without capture a criminal, but because he is him no one would complain, so he says he will go to rank A if he captures some criminals, and the second in command and the receptionists are still amazed at such information. He tells them to make preparations to increase his ranking and then apologizes to him for the confusion, and Cain says it's fine, so he says he was surprised when he found out that she was engaged, but now he's calmer knowing him and taking care of her even though she's out of control in her most of the time. After that she talks about the battles with him, but he implies something else and Cain is very ashamed, but the guild man tells Cain to relax because he knows she is talking about battles and that it is her way. Even in heaven the gods are watching him, and the creator god said that he has to get even stronger. After all, Aaron's seal will be broken after 300 years, and everyone is amazed and says that he has to get much stronger, and says that such a person could be a good master for him, but it changes for him seeing his card Dorado, showing that he starts the next day. Cain accepts studying with Silk and tells, but at the same moment Tijuana appears telling about the adventures and saying that he wants to go somewhere else, leaving both of them furious because they didn't know what had happened. Cain was taking a peaceful nap when suddenly his maid woke him up, informing him who was late for his entrance exam. She is desperate to help him, but he is very calm and using his ability he arrives just in time. When he enters the school he realizes that he is in the common wing when he does not see himself there with Silk and tells, but he is too excited and sees his test there and remembers everything he studied in his past life. Of course this is because he is from Japan and they take it in a very strict way, because this friend I would be like Naruto in the Chunin entrance exam if you remember, and he ended up with a 30-minute break, and then the test is magic and he asks if he could use all his strength, and the teacher says of course. After all, they have a protective barrier. The students start to use magic on the case around there, and he realizes that this is the real strength of a child and that he was already going to exaggerate cool, so he concentrated all his magic on his turn, but in reality this only gave more power to the shot, which caused mega destruction, and as always it surprised everyone. They go to see if no one was hurt and they fall, then they apologize and go to sword training. There they meet several adventurers, among them Claude, who is a ranker and identifies Cain and says he will evaluate him, so Cain refuses, but the instructor says he can't refuse if Claude said he would evaluate him, then so will Cain. Afraid he starts the fight, but because Claude has the A rank he couldn't hold back, he goes for it. Claudia then excited too goes with everything. Cain even says that if it were a normal fight the other child would be there on the stairs, but he says that that he is not a normal child, but they are stopped by the instructor, who says that if they fight so intensely they will discourage the other children, and for them to stop. And Claude says that he thinks he exaggerated and invites Cain to go on an adventure with him, and Cain refuses, but Claude doesn't give up. Then the instructor says that he's already seen his talent and that he can go home and come back only upon approval. Cain feels bad and goes back home and of course stays there disguising the mess he made. Cain, I get home, the maid apologizes to him and says she's going to prepare a delicious meal. Then the king asks Cain what the hell that was, and Cain explains that he used beginner's magic but it didn't work out very well. Then the king says that Tell said he didn't attended the ceremony there. Cain confused the locations and ended up taking the test with the commoners. He created a new account and went to battle against the beginners. Going back a little in time, the director of the school informed the Duke of the results and said that a commoner aced the test and fought on equal terms with rank A and destroyed the school wall, and the Duke burst out laughing because he realized that it was certainly Cain who did all that, and the king's advisor already leaves a budget for repairs at the school there with Cain for him to pay. On the day of approval, Telestia didn't go because she was mad at Cain, and Silk told him everything that happened and said that he was the best in the class, and the two of them soon after. In the second and third cases, soon after he finds his sister, who hugs him and says that she missed him since he will never visit them and is happy that he passed with flying colors, and informs him that he will have to give a speech. At home, the employee was already anxious, but he arrived and said that it was the first, and she was immensely happy and went to prepare another excellent meal the next day. He finally entered the right wing, which is the wing of the nobles there. Telestia and Silk, they welcome him and then head to the ceremony. Of course the boys are jealous of him and the girls have already fallen in love with him, making the boys even more jealous. At the ceremony, his parents were also present, so Cain finally makes his speech and apologizes to everyone. Due to the confusion, he expresses his gratitude and says that he hopes to count on everyone's support and that he wants to make many friends at the academy, and he is applauded with applause. The king then goes there and gives a speech also saying that there is an out-of-the-ordinary student who slaps a lied to Cain on the back, causing the Duke and the counselor, including me, to burst out laughing and his parents to become tremendously embarrassed, but he counts on the teachers to provide him with the best LSD education Silk then receives, and the teacher tells them to choose which path they want to follow. Cain would go for adventure, but Silk Tellies advises him to go for nobility. After all, he already has land and has a lot to learn. But who could choose more than one? Then he gets excited saying choose then nobility, magic, adventurer and magical items. Then Telestia says he will choose nobility and internal matter, and says embarrassed that it is to manage his domains in the future, and if what he says nobility and eat so that he help in the future on their lands, and smiles agreeing with Telestia. When they leave for the break, they see Parma, the Nico girl, from before, being disturbed by the jealous nobles who said that if she hadn't enrolled, one of them would go to class A. In other words, he blamed a bunch of losers for their incompetence on the girl, but Cain ends the confusion and says he knows the girl and talks about the fact that nobles and commoners are equal. The boys disagree and continue to bother her and say they will talk to their father to destroy her family. Then Silk and Telestia ask what they are going to do, and then they get down on their knees, apologizing and sneaking out. Then Telestia and Silk get jealous of Cain and make him stay there too, on their knees while talking with Parma, but they seem to get along well. Then a voice appears in Cain's head calling him to talk and saying that he really was very interesting as they told him, and he goes to the library guided by the other boy, and there he is transported to another place, and there the boy greets him by his real name from Japan. Then he drinks a cup of coffee that he hasn't had in years since he came to this world, and the boy smiles. Then the boy reveals that the god spoke to him and introduces himself as Yuya, surprising Cain. After all, this is the name of the first hero, and King Cain asks if he is a ghost, and he told him to use the evaluation on him. He used it and saw him as the god of creation, and Yuya reveals that he created that world that Cain is in and that he has been alive for over 300 years. Really? So Yuya says that the gods called him so he can train. Cain says he is having problems because he is too strong, and then he challenges Cain to take the cookie from his hand since he is so strong and easily. Yuya stops him, so he reveals to Cain that he will have to become strong to fight with Aaron, a being who caused chaos in the world and several deaths resembling discord like the Oracle, and that Yuya and his old group sealed it, but recently the seal began to undo. Cain asks if he couldn't resolve it again, and he says that now he is the god of that world and that he and the crowns cannot interfere. In other words, it is with Cain. He says that this has to do with his past life. He transports him and gives him a sword and says that from today onwards he will train him, and it is up to him if his mission is to return to the mansion where they were, and for that he will need to raise at least 300 levis, taking him to level 600, and to relax that in a year in that world is equal to a day in his world. Cain then advances and destroys several monsters that kept appearing into their world. Telestia and Silk and the maid are tremendously worried about his disappearance, but Tellys says for them to calm down. After all, it is Cain, and for them to guard him until his return. Cain is already in the other world, almost being devoured and accepting his defeat, but they shoot magic defeating the monster, and he reflects that he has been in that forest for months and months without decent sleep, fighting day after day. Then he hears a noise and goes to the place. It was a wolf cub that was injured, and he in his automatic mode, says that he will stop with the wolf's suffering, but when he was about to hit him he comes back to himself and says that he always wanted to protect people and he can't forget that, and he heals him even without mana using everything he had, and he blacks out and he wakes up with the wolf protecting him and striking several monsters the little wolf, so he goes to pet him and he cheers up. After that he says that Raku, which is the name of the little wolf, helped him immensely to recover his sense of protection and that he couldn't give up because he has something to protect. And then he finds the mansion and he is already old, and Yuya says that it has been 4 years and is surprised by the wolf that is actually a divine beast, which surprised Cain, and Yuya says that he can make a deal with him if he is so attached to the Cain, and so it was done and now it can be summoned. Next Yuya says that Dara will be his new master, and at Cain's request he tells him what Eren has to do with his past, but it is not revealed to us. Dara then goes into battle with Cain and says that he is more weak than him and Yuya is stronger than him, and they were much stronger than Yuya, so he was going to punch him and make him go dark, and he wakes up in Dara's house with his wife welcoming Cain and with the baby dragon. Going into a friendly battle with Raku, Cain then cries with emotion as he delights in the well-prepared food that he has already. He didn't eat for a while because he was surviving in the forest. Dara's wife says that he can rest assured that he will live there with them now, and he wonders what the people of his world must be like, and their Tellies and Silk are trying hard to learn how to cook and to make Cain happy when he returns. Being guided by the maid who raised him, Dara continues training Cain, beating the guy up and improving physically. A year passes and he continues to hit Cain firmly and saying that Eren will not have pity on him. So back to when Yuya told him, he remembers and reflects that they were the god of fun along with the other gods, but he was expelled because he developed a deadly game that involved the citizens, and Yuya tells him to stay strong so he can protect his companions differently of him who failed to protect his companions who were his parents. Then we are shown when they were summoned and a nun helped him, and then the gods asked them for help as they could not interfere in the physical world, and then a fierce battle of Yuya along with Cain's parents, but they were very strong and stopped them, and Cain's mother protected the nun by giving her life, and Cain's furious father used mana overloads and went after Eren, trapping him even though he was hit, allowing that Yuya oscillate both on his deathbed. They apologized to their son for not being able to return, and while he was enveloped by these memories, Kim mastered the overload technique and beat Dare Cain. Then he goes to his parents' grave and thanks them for thinking about him and also thanks Yuya for taking care of him. Yuya stretches out the cookie and this time Cain manages to catch it, and Yuya concludes that he has gotten stronger. Cain was about to say goodbye saying he was going back to his world when Yuya invited him to have a cup of coffee, and Cain asked but it wouldn't be a nuisance like in the Keys, don't wait for the wrong series. And then Yuya asks if he would come back and then uses magic to make his appearance return to 5 years ago when he arrived in that world, and Yuya tells him to summon Deku to take him. He goes to his world and then he also appears. He tells him to take the mini dragon and make the contract with him. Cain thanks them both for everything, he was so excited about it that moment, and Yuya says to visit them and gives him a sword to give to the current king. Yuya and Darren say he will be much stronger than them. After all, he has something great to protect, and when he arrives at Sylvia's house, the maid who created Cain is already emotional, and Silk Telestia already takes the cookies they made for him, and Cain eats it while tears come out because it was so good, and then they both tell him to be welcome back and then put it back. Knee punishment as it was expected. The next day he told everything to the king and the others who could hardly believe that it had all happened, but when they saw the katana that the first king used they believed him, and Duke informs him that he forgot to accept the mission to pass to rank and that if he doesn't register it will be cancelled. So at the guild master informs that he was almost cancelling. Cain explains that he was very busy, and after he presses there a little, Cain accepts the mission to capture some bandits. Arriving at the place he uses his ability to fly and goes with the sword Yuya gave him. There he sees several bandits surrounding a carriage and his two teachers there protecting his gaming business partner from Cain and also the pair's father, but when he sees Mealy injured he quickly heals her and goes after the bandits containing his power and saying that he will not be forgiven after finishing him easily. His teachers are at peace, but after all it is an Al rank mission. He shows his card A rank, impressing her, and he says they can rest assured after all he will take care of it. After that he takes the tied up thieves to the city and leaves Parma's father safe. Parma also appears and is very grateful to him, and a correction, he made the trade contract with her uncle who is very similar to her father, and Parma asks if he will have time after his duties as a baron, and Mealy is already amazed that he has become one, and Nina jokes that he became a party. After that Millie leaves him embarrassed, hugging him and talking that he is practically becoming an adult and has grown a lot, and he runs in shame to take the thieves to the kingdom, and his teachers run after him. After all, they would take him along. The guild receptionist is surprised by Cain's speed in completing the mission and says who will give the report to the guild master, and then the idiots disturbing Millie and Nina the same as before, then once again disturbing them with a failed way. They ignore them, but they were going up. Then Cain stops them and they are already shaking at the base, scared of him when they recognize him, and Claude appears saying that he recognizes that murderous aura, and the idiots take the opportunity to escape. Claude then reveals that Millie is his little sister, and she reveals that she was Cain's teacher when he was 5 years old, and Claude already calls them all there to drink and celebrate its conclusion, and his wife arrives there picking on him, but they end up going to celebrate anyway. He tells me what happened and Claude is surprised that Cain ranked, but understands. After all, he accompanied him in his duel and he remains completely amazed because her brother reached the ranking just using his swordsmanship talent and brute strength without the use of magic, so Cain is really strong, and Nina remembers that he is not just a rank like a baron, and at that time Claude and his wife are surprised and Claude apologizes for being so informal and asks him not to be executed, but Cain says he won't do that. Claude asks how he is so strong, but Cain can't tell about the gods, so Millie talks about the dragon he defeated and the bags, what plays Claudia's wife also wanting a bag like that, and after talking to Cain and he agrees to make it for them too, she deletes it. And Claude says that she is very weak with drinks. Cain remembers that he will have to prepare for class the next day and he has to hurry. Claudio asks why a baron has to go to school and he says embarrassed that there are many things he doesn't know and would like to learn, and Nina says he is a good boy and was going to hug him, but he runs away in shame. Everyone reflects on how this life must be pulling at him. In that Hatcha, the receptionist, says that the adventure instructor was injured and they needed a replacement, and Claude already sees an opportunity. The next day in the magic class everyone gets ready to start and the teacher says that Cain is prohibited from using offensive magic in the school residence, and all the instructors have already been warned that the barriers will not support Claudia and the others watching everything, and saying how Cain must be feeling out of place, and for them to put their plan into action. The teacher in charge of the adventurers call Claudia and the girls inform her that the guild let them in today, leaving everyone impressed. Claudia then tells them to show their adventurer cards and Cain feels bad as he didn't want to feel even more out of place if everyone saw his golden card, so they fall. He says he forgot and Claudia scolds him saying to always hang out with him and that it serves as identification. The girls come as everyone looks at him and then Claudia decides to put the plan into action. Claude trains some students in training sword and the girls take care of the magic. Cain feels even more isolated, but their plan is to demonstrate their strength to the students so that they can later see how Cain is stronger than them and thus admire him. So Cain waited patiently to duel, and when it was his turn the class time is over and Claude says he calculated the time wrong and apologizes to Cain, and he says next time, and the instructor interrupts saying that there won't be a next time and that they spent all the money they had for this fund on school concert and they couldn't hire these high-level adventurers again, and Cain falls into tears. At night Cain enters the forest of high-rank monsters and fiercely attacks the monsters while saying Claudie's name and was furious with Claudie. The city sees explosions and believes he is the demon king and sends knights while everyone fears for their lives. Cain's father quickly goes to the place and Cain teleports away saying he is feeling much better. Getting there once again his son's handkerchief and he soon understands everything. His father covers his tracks in the report to the king and the king asks if CIM knows anything about the event in the forest and he says no, so the king decides to cooperate with nations to investigate and becomes very afraid and says that it will not be necessary and confesses that it was him, making the king reprimand him once again that in the forest a fragment fell and a dragon devoured a goblin. That had him thus making Aaron aware of the dragon who is now Aaron even if just a small fragment, and then Cain's father scolding him again. Same as the last time back at school, Cain is in the summoning class and miraculously the teacher allowed him to participate. After all, it is not offensive magic, so he, an expert who appeared there, informs that he has two types of magic and that he creates a contract with a creature after establishing a bond with him, and here he invokes through a magic circle and makes the contract, and then here it will be the same Pokemon will be summoned through the circle, and if they are unable to sign the contract they will disappear. So the students summoned several animals, small and signed, and one of them summoned a beast but it refused because he didn't have enough mana. Then it was Cain's turn after everyone tried, and the instructor told him to use all the magic in the circle without fear because if they can't sign the contract there with the monster will disappear and so will Cain. The instructor was surprised and Cain used light magic so the students wouldn't see. It turns out that he summoned the demon king himself. A mere human wonders summon him. Then he sees Cain's status and Cain is already preparing to attack, so the demon king kneels down and apologizes if he was rude and will make the contract with all the happiness in the world if he wishes. Just order him and he will destroy an entire nation using his military power of all demons. He says, "O chosen one, my name is Seven. Firm the contract and you can invoke me whenever you want," and Cain accepts and says that he will not destroy any nation and for him to stop calling him the chosen one, and Seven say okay, but if you want to destroy a nation you already know the instructor, so you ask if it was the demon king and he says he disappeared because he didn't sign the contract, and the instructor says okay, I'll believe it, that's exactly what happened, right? Okay. He leaves with doubts in mind. Head who believes it worked well but it didn't. Then he is in front of the king and the instructor was a big gossip and he told the king, and the king asks him to tell him what he invoked there, and then he tells it, leaving everyone completely surprised with such a feat, and him asked to show your status that must have increased thanks to the first king, and tells the instructor that what he will see is a state secret, that he will be executed if he leaks his status, then informs him that he is a demigod and along with the title of immeasurable status, leaving everyone completely amazed again, and the instructor already bows and calls him God. He says not to do that. Man, the the Duke and the Counselor have they thought about what they could call him now, and the king asks if he's not really going to destroy the nation or even the world because now he can do it. Little does he know that we could do it too, and he says to just treat him as always. The king says that's great, but if he wants to, I don't know, he'll go crazy. Just ask. The nation doesn't need to destroy anything. He hands it over without resisting. The king tell the instructor that now he must understand why he must maintain secrecy, and tells Cain to hand over a city to him, in which case he will hand over a city to Cain and the title of Viscount, and will announce his engagement and will not accept objections, and says that a man who cannot protect a simple city will not be able to protect a nation like this, giving understand that he is already training him so that in the future he can take the throne. Sylvia congratulates him and says that the city will be close to the capital, but his butler brings him news from his father that a Milan of monsters in the forest is taking place, and Cain goes to his old one home. There he meets his older brother who gives him all the details about the events and that you can't pretend that it didn't happen, and that's why everyone is on alert. The boys are more violent and everything indicates a new rebellion, and Cain says that will give away. The brother says he couldn't ask for that, so he shows his ranking card surprising a brother and says that many things happen, so he goes to the guild in his city, and there he meets the receptionist who registered him as an adventurer. In this she explains the situation of the adventurers and all the chaos, and Cain incite Millie and Nina, who were also summoned for the mission along with the high-rank adventurers from the guild, and they talk about what happened there in the forest and they couldn't get to the heart of it, and Cain says that he will explore. Everyone says that he can't do it alone, and he says that in that case he will call a person and implies that it would be S. Once there, he summons Raku and the baby dragon who greets him and then makes an analysis of the entire scenario with his perception ability. Cain feels that he is being observed, so he defeats several monsters, but it wasn't any of them, so he summons him if asked to investigate the forest, and is told that there are an absurd amount of L-rank monsters there, and then with Cain's permission he invokes a subordinate there from intelligence to investigate better. Dalmatia is one of the old four kings and is retired, but he is still the brave one and already bows before Cain and is surprised that a demon king has a contract with a human, so Dalma uses his hidden demonic centipede ability because Cain was very nervous, and several hidden monsters appear and then they put the sword on him. Dalmatia is impressed, and Cain tells them to take care of it until he comes back and returns to the city, and then leaves the monsters there with Claudia and the girls. Dea Floresta in a darker climate guides the Dalmatia to prepare for battle, and together they go to the center. Aaron notices their movement and already orders all the monsters under his command to attack the humans. Set quickly returns and warns Cain about the happened, and he then instructs everyone to do the same and says that they don't need to worry about him because he has strong friends with a higher ranking, and the set is already moved by him calling him a friend. Tijuana joins him there and says who will, but Cain tells her protect the city and her home, and she is totally happy to be able to protect his home. Cain then says that he counts on her and runs towards Batalha. Asks why not teleport, and he says that there are no humans who can do that and for him to control so as not to generate suspicion, and Set reflects on how complicated it must be to be human. Tom is then taking care of the dragons, but Cain arrives with 7 and they are already preparing to go against the center of all the chaos, and their Aaron is waiting for him. Them two in a memory. Quickly Tijuana is asking who the new people are, and they introduce themselves. Claude as a friend, the wife as the friend's wife, Millie as a former teacher, and Nina jokes that she is a lover, making the atmosphere heavy for her and her jokes always making the general uncomfortable. Better Cain's character then realizes that they were behind it all and then says that he will take care of everything there and he can go to the center of all the chaos. He says that he will summon his subordinates, and Cain says not to exaggerate and destroy the forest completely, and if jokes that he who should say this to Cain in the city of Tijuana is coordinating everything, and Millie decides to help Cain. Her brother says that the reckless little sister, of course I had to do this, and decide together with his wife who beat him and calls him a slow person to go quickly, and Nina also goes back to the forest. He invokes the 4 new kings and says that a friend asked for help and he gives him instructions on what to do, and they are surprised that someone asked to make the demon king answer him, and who the hell would it be, and are also surprised at how a Dalmatia great legendary general was there, and he reveals that it was a demigod who signed the contract with him, leaving them even more amazed. And Seth goes with everyone to finish off the monsters around. Cain is also obliterating some monsters when he is intercepted by a strong magic. Also Aaron reveals himself and calls Cain the puppy of the gods, and Cain tells him to stop, and of course the villain wouldn't just accept it and say no, calm down man, wow, I'm going home, I'm going to stop here. Then Aaron reveals that it's a game to know which humans will perish. Millie and the others notice people flying and are shocked, but Nina reminds them that they must be Cain's friends and everything makes sense, and they also join the battle. Meanwhile Cain is in dialogue with Aaron and they are in a legendary battle disputing who has the strongest magic, while Aaron says that he has the same eyes as the ones that selled him, making him fall to understand that he is talking about his parents. His friends are fighting in the forest, and Claude says that he doesn't know how many more will come, but he is sure that he will drink one ride today, and the woman knocks at him as always and says that today she leaves, and everyone laughs at the situation and says that they will celebrate together. Aaron continues chasing Cain cain and casting spells. He then summons Raku and the baby dragon but ends up being hit. Raku injured in combat but switches to Claudio and the girls who were suffering difficulties in the combat were going to be shot, but Chuan doesn't save them and thanks him and says that the city's defense is already very solid and that now she will take care of the front line, and Claude and the girls join her in the fight as well. Battle back to Raku and Gim the baby dragon. I take damage for him and they continue attacking Cain. Then he gets in front and says that he won't let that continue and that it has nothing to do with the gods, he just wants to protect everyone's smile, and uses the overload and were already identifiable with the same one from the other time he was sealed. The box then begins to compete with Aaron for magic there, and a very strong light is mana, surprising all the villagers, and Cain continued giving his all when Raku and Gwyn stopped and he asked what was 7 Dalmatia appear and say that he was the one who said it wasn't to be exaggerated. Hey, when Cain looks ahead he sees mass destruction of the part of the forest they were dueling and they generate nothing. They even joke, scolding him for the destruction, and then they revealed that the monsters retreated and the city is saved together with the citizens thanks to him. The chosen one of the gods Mali and Tijuana run to embrace him, and he's happy he got it. Protect the smile of all es Dalmatia. They say he is quite a chosen one, referring to God, and teleports, and Cain is happy with his friends. This changes to the capital. He is getting scolded by King Ali for the light. Everyone thought the gods had descended and Cain apologizes. Normal magic wasn't enough so he ended up using imperial magic, and the king continues with his scolding even though he tried to explain that it was to finish off that dragon. And the king asks about the flying man they saw and falls and says it was the demon king with a kind of face, and the king says he's tired and asks Consul Hiro if he couldn't just give up the throne to him soon, and Counselor Reno says next to Duke doesn't, so the king remembers what he said before and names him Viscount, gives him a domain instead of a city in the middle of a royal audience with all the nobles, and he breaks the news to Tijuana, Silk, Telestia, and his father who were worried. After all, the guild likes to leave all its weight in that domain that it has now taken possession of, and many nobles, even those who previously had that domain there, gave up Telestia and was going to talk to his father, but Cain stops him and says that he's fine with will be able to create a new city, and he is excited, a city where everyone can smile. His brides are then happy and join him, and he tells them to go see you there. Then Cain then arrives in the city and the king receives the report the guild was going to make a prank call with him welcoming party, but he ended up beating everyone up. And then in the tavern everyone started talking about a certain silver demon referring to him, and one of the idiots kicked the little girl who was serving the staff, so he attacked the idiots and kicked them out, and then he was arrested by the guards. In that point the duke and the advisor were laughing and the king just worried, but currently they fall with Telestia and Silk receive a visit from Seven asking for help. His wife found out that he cheated on her and kicked him out of his castle, but there wasn't even time. Leffen, who is his wife, already came after him pulling his ear, and if presents it to Cain and apologizes for her husband and asks what Cain thinks, and he says that it is unforgivable for him to cheat even more with such a beautiful wife at home, and she feels flattered, but Seth warns Cain that women change after marriage and for him to be careful, and he is reprimanded by his wife and Silk, also by Telestia, talking about how he dares to look at the other woman, and Cain is there feeling bad that even though he didn't do anything wrong he ends up getting into this picture. Then he is fan says she is relieved they said everything she wanted to say, and she'll tell Cain if he makes her cry he'll see her, and Cain is already shaking at the base, so Leffen forgives Seth and tells them to go home, and the girls tell them to visit for tea, and she is wasted smiling while Seth screams, reminding Cain not to exaggerate, but the guard continues reporting that Cain complained that the church's tithe was too expensive boy, and in addition he also revealed that when a parallel guild was going to attack the priest he was already there and detained everyone who was not satisfied. Created city walls. Gods even questioned whether his actions were good, but the creator god says yes, after all he still has a lot to do, and Tellies and Silk say that he created a castle bigger than the king's, and they scold him, and I laughed with a little guilt, and in the end like he always ends up apologizing to everyone who was scolding him, and so we come to the end of Saga. Friends, I wanted to thank everyone who followed us this far. I'm still doing it thanks to your support. Comment on which saga you'd like next. Remember, leave a like and subscribe to support the project. I'll stay here and we'll be together, bando.